Hi guys, I'm Maylin Dovan, certified athletic therapist and founder of Rehab-U Movement and Performance Therapy. Welcome to our YouTube channel. This week we're going to talk about gait and performance. Really what the study of gait shows us or tells us is that energy starts from the ground and moves up. So those ground reaction forces, those impact forces create potential energy for dynamic movement, jumping, cutting, changing directions, all that kind of stuff, and obviously walking and running, right? And a lot of that potential energy comes from elasticity and recoil of fascia. Now, when we talk about energy transfer from the feet and up the kinetic chain, there are many fundamental components of that. One is perception, so perceiving the ground reaction forces or perceiving that through the foot. Two is absorption, which is a little bit more muscular or myofascial, and then transferring or releasing that energy, which is a fascial response. Hey guys, thanks for watching our videos, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I've done a previous capsule on the foot as the foundation for all your lifts, so you should check that out in our video section, where I talk about the foot and working on the cutaneous mechanoreceptors of the foot so that you can have that perception of the ground and the forces, and that's an important first step. So foot stability, again, is going to be fundamental and is going to be very important. Now, what I want to focus on today is kind of more globally how we absorb and how we transfer forces, how we absorb and release that potential energy for dynamic movement that comes from gait, that comes from that impact force, that comes from that ground reaction force. So really, to put it really simply, we absorb energy and release energy via rotation along the kinetic chain, right? So when we're absorbing energy, we absorb energy in internal rotation and we release energy through external rotation. So if you move up and down onto your toes and back down, when you move up onto your tippy toes as if you're going to jump, you'll notice that you're pushing the ground away, you're releasing energy, and you're moving into external rotation. Your hips are going to move into external rotation. And then if you absorb, when you come back down, you'll notice that you're moving into internal rotation. So there's a rotation aspect of absorbing and releasing energy. So those are the kind of things we look into when we talk about the foot, when we talk about how we want the foot to function, to decelerate and all that kind of stuff. Now, when we talk about impact forces entering the body, so a little bit more of that absorption response that I was telling you about, it's important to know that impact forces enter the body faster than the muscles can contract. So there's an important anticipation of that, which is why you'll always hear the expression, we need to absorb before we need to jump. If you've worked with young athletes that are in jumping sports, basketball, volleyball, you may often have heard that. Kids need to learn to absorb before they learn to jump, right? So if you're more efficient at absorbing, you'll be more efficient at releasing that energy. So it will indeed make your jump more efficient. So what are the kind of ways that we can work on absorption and at becoming better at timing that absorption and anticipating that absorption, knowing that the impact forces from the ground are going to enter our body faster than we can contract our muscles, but we do need to have a stiffness that's created to absorb and store that energy to then release it. Okay, so let's check out how we could work on that via some exercises. So as we move into this first exercise to work on absorption, let's remember, we absorb via internal rotation, but we need to control that, right? We want to create stiffness so that we don't keep going into internal rotation. So we need to create that impact, that stiffness to absorb via internal rotation, but block our movement. So I'm here with Sabrina, who was kind enough to be my model today. Sabrina is a national level boxer and also a kinesiologist. So she's going to be our supermodel for these exercises. So our first exercise is a depth landing. So with a depth landing, you're not jumping off, you're stepping off a low box and just absorbing that. So Sab's going to go ahead and do a couple for us. So as soon as her feet hit the ground, she's absorbing and stopping that movement. Go ahead and do one more. Good. And then we'll show you what we don't want. What we don't want is for her to continue absorbing down. So for her to squat down as she absorbs that landing. So as soon as her feet hit the ground, we want her to create that stiffness and stop that downward movement. Our second absorption exercise is just a progression from the first one. Really, instead of landing on 2 feet, we're gonna do single leg depth landing. So landing on 1 foot, same concept. We wanna step down and then create that stiffness to stop that downward movement right away. There we go. As soon as that foot hits the ground, absorb and stiffen. Just one more. Good job. So same idea as the first exercise. We don't wanna drop down into a single leg squat as we absorb. So as soon as the contact is made, the downward movement stops. Our third absorption exercise, again, is a single leg progression, but now we're also doing a little bit of the acceleration portion or the release portion. We're still focused on the absorption aspect, but Sabrina's gonna go into a lunge position. She's gonna kind of kick up and then absorb. So she's lifting that knee up and then having to absorb. Good. So we've increased the absorption requirement with a little bit of a release, but still really focused on the absorption. Same concept, as soon as the foot hits the ground, create that stiffness and stop that downward momentum. So there you have it, guys, a little bit more in-depth explanation on why absorption is so important and why we always use that expression, learn to land before you learn to jump. Gait tells us a lot about how we absorb energy, and it also tells us that we need to anticipate that we need to create that stiffness, that we need that appropriate timing and capacity. So working on stuff like depth landings, single leg depth landings, and progressing from there onto the release of the energy is a really good point to start, obviously starting with the feet, as I mentioned earlier. And we'll see you next week.